Welcome in. Quite an eventful week 5. Heading into week 6. Recording this on Saturday morning. So want to kind of go back to last week. Talk about a few. I'm not going to go through the entire league, but just want to hit on a few teams and a few kind of individual situations that I think, storyline wise, are worth keeping an eye on. We'll start with the Jets. They looked awful. Now, that was a close game with the Vikings in London. I would say thanks to the Jets' defense and thanks to the Vikings' offense. I mean, Sam Darnold had a crucial turnover late, but that was not a good display by New York. Rodgers throws 3 picks. One of them was a pick 6 to Van Ginkel. The Jets got absolutely nothing going on the ground. Now, they did get Garrett Wilson involved, sort of. He did have 13 catches and a million targets. But Garrett Wilson, I don't know what's going on with the Jets and the connection there with Wilson and Rodgers. He is a big play guy. He won the Offensive Rookie of the Year in 2022 with, let's be honest about it, a shitty quarterback situation. I forget who all was taking snaps for the Jets that year. I mean, I know Joe Flacco was throwing the rock for them, but I can't remember who all was, starting games for the Jets that year. But Wilson worked through it, ultimately wins the award. Was really impressive his rookie year. This season, he's averaging 8.8 yards per reception. That is not Garrett Wilson's identity. He's a great route runner. He's got great hands. He's an explosive player. Yet, for some reason, he's in this weird, he's catching everything like within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage. And I don't know if that's the play calling or, just the philosophy, whether these are hot routes, whether these are checks at the line of scrimmage. But I don't think this is the best version of Garrett Wilson when he is basically averaging a little bit longer than, elite running backs in terms of yards per carry, except we're talking yards per reception. Obviously, the big news of the week was the Jets firing Robert Saleh. Now, back in the summertime, we talked about Saleh or I should say the Jets situation in general, and hey, what happens if they start 2024 a little slow or I should say poorly? And that's exactly what has come to fruition. The Jets are 2-3. The offense just is not clicking. Whether that's Rodgers, Nate Hackett, it sounds crazy to say this. The Jets last year almost felt better on offense with a horrendous quarterback situation. This season, Rodgers has started every game. I believe he's taken every snap for them. And somehow, it almost feels like the offense has regressed. And I was looking this up. I mean, I am pretty surprised that they fired Saleh. I think, look, his record, I want to say it was 20-36. He was hired in before the 2021 season, so technically this season is his 4th with the organization. 20-36 is absolutely fireable, right? That is not what they brought you in here for. I was surprised that they decided to make this move when they did, especially when you consider if they win, and I do not think the Jets have much of a chance against Buffalo on Monday night. But the reality is, if they win that game, they are in first place in the division. You do not see a lot of, or I should say, it's not common to see coaches be terminated in season, right? That in and of itself is more rare. I want to say the Jets, since Woody Johnson acquired the team, they have never fired a coach in season. But to fire a coach in season leading into a game or leading into the bye week where the next game you have a chance to win against a divisional opponent and take first place in the AFC East, that is strange. Like I said, I'm surprised that they opted to do that. I'm not surprised at, given Saleh's results in his tenure there, that he got fired. I just think that's questionable timing. And I am not buying at all the Aaron Rodgers had, nothing to do with that or no say in that. We heard reports that he talked to Woody Johnson just one night before. Are you kidding me? You're going to really expect us to believe that the discussion or the topic of Saleh just never came up? But anyway, what I was getting at before, when I saw that Saleh got fired, I actually did some search, the old Google machine, did my research, and I don't know if I was sleeping on this. I'd like to consider myself a football nerd and just consuming the NFL at an unhealthy rate. I love the league. I had no recollection whatsoever that as recently as 2022, which would have been Saleh's second year with the team, the New York Jets went into the month of December, which was week 13 that year. They rolled into the month of December at 7-4. I mean, again, that's on me for not knowing that. But all I recall from the Jets' 2022 season was that crazy comeback that they had in Cleveland early on. Joe Flacco was the quarterback, in that game, and they had that crazy comeback where the Browns were up 2 scores late. The Jets get a touchdown, they get the onside kick, they score again, they get out of there with a win. They ended up losing the next week. I'm looking at this now, to the Cincinnati Bengals. They dropped to 1-2. They then won 4 in a row. They beat the Steelers on the road, Miami at home. They beat the Packers at Green Bay, and they beat Denver also on the road. So you're talking 4 straight wins, 3 of those on the road. They then lost to the Patriots. They beat the Bills, lost to the Patriots again, and then beat the Bears. And that's how they ultimately got to 7-4. That was week 12. That ended up being their last win of the season. But the reason I bring that up is Saleh was the coach. They had, obviously not a good quarterback situation in 2022, but they did have Garrett Wilson and Sauce Gardner. That was the year that those guys ended up winning the Offensive Rookie of the Year and the Defensive Rookie of the Year. So give them credit. Big-time draft, absolutely hit. They also drafted Breece Hall that year. Now, his 2022 was shortened due to the knee injury, but hell of a draft, right? They also had Jermaine Johnson. I think they took him that season as well. So you got to give credit to Douglas. The Jets' 2022 draft absolutely set them on a path. However, this season, for whatever reason, the offense is, including Hall and Garrett Wilson, right? I mean, outside of this last game where Wilson was definitely more involved, they're struggling. As an example, Breece Hall had 1,585 total yards from scrimmage in 2023. He scored 9 touchdowns, despite having, Zach Wilson, Mike White, and just, not good quarterback play. He is nowhere near that pace in 2024. Now, that's a small sample size. That can change, but something seems off that you have this elite player who is not only falling behind pace of where he was last year, the guy you brought in to save the franchise has started every game, and somehow Hall he almost feels like a non-factor. Garrett Wilson in 2022, as a rookie, had 83 catches, over 1,100 yards. He then had over 1,000 last year without good quarterback play. And he also, other than that Vikings game, has felt like he's not involved. And so what I would look at is you've drafted, they're still on rookie contracts, Garrett Wilson, Sauce Gardner, Breece Hall. What is the plan going forward? Because the Jets sit at 2-3. They just fired the head coach. Now they have an interim coach. And those are really good players that they're going to be coming due for contracts as soon as this offseason. And I'm not saying it's because of Aaron Rodgers that, we've seen a dip in their production, but let's remember, Rodgers was injured on the 4th play last year in game 1. So he essentially never played in 2023. And those guys played as well or even better than you could have hoped given the quarterback situation in 2023. And all of a sudden, I look at 2024 and go, well, what's different in 2024? Well, Rodgers has started every game so far. How are these elite players who are good enough to win offensive and defense, Sauce Gardner, I shouldn't say there's a direct impact there, but let's just look at Hall and Garrett Wilson. How is the offensive rookie of the year and a running back who had, nearly 1,600 yards from scrimmage on a bad offense where everybody knew he was getting the ball, how does that suddenly dip in 2024? I think the Jets are facing a lot of challenges right now. I can't say I agree with the timing of firing Robert Saleh, especially this early in the season. I would say you at least should let him coach out the rest of 2024, see where things go. But now you back yourself into a corner. And I talked about this on the summer episode where we dove into the Jets a little bit. You are forced to hire a new coach in 2025. At least if you let Saleh coach out the remainder of 2024. Now, I don't see any indications, so right, I'm not saying, hey, keep Saleh and you're going to go, 10-7 or 11-6 and you're going to make the postseason. But now that you've made the decision to fire him, you have to hire a new coach going into next year. And where I think that gets a little bit weird is head coaches, even first-time head coaches, in today's NFL, you're looking at $8, $9, probably $10 million a year as a first-time head coach. And those are typically, 3 to 4 year contracts. Head coaching contracts, or just, coaching contracts, they're guaranteed. So if you hire somebody, which you are forced to do, you're looking at probably, let's just say on the low end, 3 years, $30 million. Is Aaron Rodgers going to be the Jets quarterback for 3 more years? I would say I certainly believe he's obviously going to be the quarterback for the remainder of 2024. I think he will be back in 2025. But if you hire a coach on a 3-year deal in 2025, and actually let me back up. I think most coaching candidates, their representation is not going to, if they're, worth their salt, they're not going to let them sign a 3-year contract. So let's say 4 years, $40 million for the next New York Jets head coach. That is most likely going to extend beyond Aaron Rodgers' tenure with the organization. And now you are in a position where Aaron Rodgers is absolutely, I'm not saying he's going to handpick the next head coach. He's absolutely going to have a say and a heavy influence in who the next Jets coach will be. And why I see that, or I should say why I see that as a potential problem, is if he plays the rest of this year and next year, and then it's kind of TBD, you now have a head coach that Aaron Rodgers wanted to bring in that might be under contract for 2-3 years after Rodgers decides he's done playing. And then if you say, look, we brought this guy in because Rodgers wanted him, Rodgers no longer plays here. If you fire that guy, you owe him the balance of his contract. Now, there is offset language, and if he gets another job, right, it's not necessarily you owe him 100% of the remainder. But I just think this is a terrible decision to fire Saleh. Not saying you can't. If they ended up having a poor year and they ended up firing him after 2024, that's completely understandable. But you now force yourself into a position where you have to hire the next guy. The next guy is most likely going to be under contract far beyond what Aaron Rodgers realistically will be playing with the organization for. And this just feels very, very Jets. Next up, Cleveland Browns got absolutely destroyed by the Washington Commanders. The game never felt close. They are not a good team. Coming into this season, I really thought that the Browns would have an opportunity at getting to the postseason, and I never thought they would be in a position to win the division, but I just thought this roster is too talented to not at least, or not have a chance of at least getting to the postseason, even if they didn't win a game. But it really feels like this season is going nowhere. And I would look at, much like the Carolina Panthers, the meddlesome owner torpedoed this team. They have so much talent. They have really good players on both sides of the ball. The defense, they are good. They have good players. Now, they certainly haven't showed it a whole lot this season. But I just think without Haslam interfering, I don't think they ever even get Deshaun Watson. But I think Haslam makes that decision. He forces that on Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski. And here they are, right? We're in year 3 of Deshaun Watson, and he cannot play. He is a shell of the former player that we saw in Houston. It's not just that he's not as good as he once was. He is not a starting caliber quarterback in the NFL. Now, we did get some news that Nick Chubb will be back in week 7 against the Bengals. I'm not sure how much that matters. Now Nick Chubb, awesome player, just terrible luck with injuries, even going back to his days at Georgia. And then obviously last year, the gruesome injury on the Monday night game. Nick Chubb, if I'm a defensive coordinator and the Browns just continue to be stubborn and trot Deshaun Watson out there, there is no reason for me not to just completely key on Nick Chubb. And who knows how he's going to look after the injury, but let's just say he looks, or he's even, somewhat close to the player that he was. If you're stacking the box with, 8, 9 guys, how much success is he going to have? You're paying your quarterback an absurd amount of money, and he's not only not living up to the contract, he's not even a serviceable starter. I mean, this is getting ugly quickly in Cleveland. And, maybe quickly isn't even the right word there, because this is now year 3 of Deshaun Watson looking completely inept. And I understand, I don't buy it for 1 second, right, that Kevin Stefanski truly believes Deshaun Watson should be the starting quarterback for the Browns. But, I mean, what do you expect the guy to do? He's being paid, $8, $9, $10+ million a year. I should have looked it up. I can't remember if Kevin Stefanski has signed an extension, following his first contract. I mean, the guy is a 2-time coach of the year. So I would expect he's making some decent coin. But, I mean, what do you expect him to say, right? Oh, the owner is forcing my hand here. I have to play Deshaun Watson. He sucks. I would rather not play him, but hey, I'm being forced to, right? He's not going to say that. No coach is going to say that, regardless of how obvious it is to, us just watching the sport. But like I said, that Chubb returning, to me, that feels more like a headline than any kind of, substance or real change that we're going to see in this Browns offense going forward. Unless they get better quarterback play, I just don't see it mattering. That offensive line is terrible. This feels like a lost season. I thought they had a chance at the playoffs, but I am regretting that. Cowboys-Steelers Sunday Night Football. Hell of a game. Sunday night delivered. Hey, whether it was delayed or not, we had to wait a little bit longer, but I thought that was a really good game. Not a ton of explosive plays, but it was competitive throughout. And ultimately, Cowboys come out of there with a much-needed win. I said going into it, and I'm kind of, somewhat in shock because I was so wrong about that Steelers-Colts game and how that thing played out that it, almost felt a little weird that the Cowboys-Steelers game ended up going kind of how I said it would, right? Low scoring. The under was going to hit. I didn't think the Steelers had enough firepower to, run away with that thing. Their defense is good enough that Dallas was not going to be able to establish any kind of lead. And yeah, just a really competitive game. Came down to the last drive, and I mean, literally the last play, right? It was 4th down, but give Dak credit. That offense comes through. They win the game. Now, some bad turnovers. I think it was the first half. The interception that Dak threw, I think he was targeting CD Lamb on the play. That was awful. And it's mind-boggling and frustrating, but I mean, it is kind of just who Dak Prescott is as a player. He's going to make some incredible plays, lead some big-time drives, and just look like a legend. And then there's going to be other times where you go, what were you looking at? What were you thinking? What went into that throw? And there was certainly some frustration. There's a lot of internet lip readers with, CD and Dak after that play. But like I said, give him credit. The Cowboys got it done. That's a big win on the road. I thought they really needed it. And I said before the game, that is the kind of game that can jumpstart your season. Obviously, the Cowboys started a little slow, had some just horrific defensive performances, got smoked at home a couple of times, but they go on the road, they beat the Giants, and then they beat the Steelers on Sunday Night Football, and hey, here comes Dallas. I think the Steelers offense, in the words of Denny Green, and maybe I'm paraphrasing here, but they are who we thought they were. Just they don't have the explosive plays, the chunk plays to put up the kind of points that they're going to need to put up if they're going to win or seriously, kind of have a chance in the division. Now, they are in first place, and they have a hell of a defense, but the offense, I look at that and I go, how are they ever going to get to 30 points in a game? And they have the players. George Pickens is a big-time vertical threat. I think Calvin Austin is a little bit underrated. I think it'll be big time for them when Jaylen Warren gets back into the lineup. Freiermuth is a really good tight end. I mean, he's not a burner, right? But this Steelers offense is going to need to figure out how to get those, 20-yard plus type of plays. As good as that defense is, you are going to find yourself in games where that is going to be necessary. And so far, the Steelers we haven't seen it. Some talk about, hey, are they going to put Russell Wilson in at quarterback going into this week? That is not the case. It will be Justin Fields. But you do have to wonder, I would say of all of the games that they've played thus far in 2024, the knock on Justin Fields and kind of the, if you want to call it a negative sentiment during his time in Chicago, I felt like Sunday night's game, that showed the most. It's not to say he can't, get things back on track and improve on that. But if he plays the way he did on Sunday night going forward, then I do think we see Russell Wilson sooner than later. We have another game across the pond this week. It will be the Jaguars and Bears. I think the Jaguars need this game much more than the Bears do. I mean, their season is on the brink here. They're already buried in the AFC South. If they want to have any chance at being competitive, not even so much in the division, but just in the conference and have an outside shot at the postseason, they have to win this game. Now, Trevor Lawrence did look a lot better last week in that Colts game. He was the number one overall pick. He's making or signed a $250 million extension this summer. He's going to need to make some plays, right? That's what you sign those guys to those amounts of money for. Not everything is going to be perfect. It's not always going to go to script. The blocking assignments are not always going to be 100%. And sometimes you just need that guy to be the difference maker and make some plays. I thought he did that in the Colts game. We'll see if he can do that. This Bears defense, I think, they are for real. And if the Jags drop this one and go to 1-5, I think that's going to be very difficult to come back from. And, we just talked about Saleh being fired in season. I wonder if, and coincidentally, this game is also in London. I wonder if the Jaguars lose this game, and particularly if they don't look good on offense, they lose, they go to 1-5. I would not rule out the possibility that Doug Peterson is fired. In terms of the personnel and gameplay, heard a lot this week about, Tank Bigsby is better than Travis Etienne. let's see how it plays out. Let's relax. ETN is the better player. I mean, he was drafted in the first round. It's crazy how we just decide week to week that, this player was more productive, so therefore he's the better player. He's going to be the starter going forward. I will say Travis Etienne, and I said this on a previous episode, he looks a little slight this year. Like he almost as though he, lost some weight in the offseason. Now, he was never like a huge guy to begin with, but he was thicker. He was more than capable. He kind of had sneaky power despite not being, the biggest guy. But for whatever reason, and maybe I'm wrong about this, it looks like he's not as big as he was in his first few seasons. And, going back a few years, I remember Le'Veon Bell, he claims his career really took off when he, got a little more lean and dropped some weight. Travis Etienne was never, 230, 235 pounds the way I think Bell was coming out of Michigan State. So it's a little curious to me that if he did in fact drop some weight, that would be his strategy. It's like you're not a big guy to begin with, so why are we dropping these LBs? Now I don't know if that's factoring into his play thus far, but certainly something to keep an eye on as far as the running back situation in Jacksonville. As much as the Jaguars need this game, I also think the Bears have the opportunity to shake the, for lack of a better term, Bears stigma. They're 3-2. They win this thing, they go to 4-2. I would say the Jaguars compared to the Chicago Bears, the Jags are the inferior team. And one sign of a really, good team is you beat the teams that you're supposed to beat. And in this one, the Bears are supposed to beat the Jaguars. And even though, hey, if they lose, they're still 3-3. But to go to 4-2, as much talk as there's been, myself included, I'm guilty of it, of, kind of questioning the Bears' start to the 2024 season. You come out of this thing 4-2. Not only have you kind of changed the momentum or swung the momentum of your season, you're right in the thick of things for the division. Now, I'm not saying they are ultimately going to win the division, but rookie quarterback to be 4-2 and have a chance, remember, they have not played the Packers or the Lions or the Vikings, right? I don't think the Bears have had a single division game so far. There's some opportunity there. So as much as the Jags need this, I think if the Bears get this thing, things become suddenly very interesting in the NFC North.